Hi, my name is Levi,
And I am Patrick.
and this channel is called Levi and Patrick Went to the Movies, where we'll be discussing a new movie that we both love every single week. Please like, comment, subscribe, ring the notification bell, because maybe 1 week soon we'll be talking about a movie that you love. But this week we are talking about Christopher Nolan's The Prestige.
This has been one of my favorite movies for a long time. By a long time, I mean, obviously, no more than 16 years.
It came out in 2006.
14 years. Wow. 14. The Prestige is so, I don't want to say complex or complicated. It is so full. There's so much in it, and it's really, really tight. Last time I watched it, I don't remember if it was like 20 or 30 minutes in before there was something that felt purely like a character moment instead of this has to be here because it's all pieces of the puzzle. The opening shot is all of the top hats, and then Christian Bale's voiceover, "Are you watching closely?" Boom, cut. Cuts to the bird cages with the finches. And so the opening shot is the reveal of the secret, which is that the machine creates clones. It duplicates. So the secret's right there. The opening shot gives away the whole movie, right? Okay, cool. As we see later with the bird trick, it's a double, right? One of the birds dies, and the other one is the Prestige, the reveal. So the first two shots of the whole movie are telling you everything that's going to happen. Hugh Jackman clones himself multiple times, and Christian Bale has a twin. He uses a double. So the first two shots set up what the two characters go through the entire movie. The opening scene is Michael Caine's voiceover of talking about the pledge, the turn, and the prestige, the 3 acts to a magic trick. The shot of him doing the trick for the young girl, Jess, is the end of the movie, where he's doing it, entertaining her, waiting for Christian Bale to show up after he's killed Hugh Jackman, and the whole movie is done. So the secrets of both characters and the end of the movie are all literally the first 3 things that happen in the entire movie. It immediately goes, so it sets these things up, it immediately goes to the action piece of the plot that the whole movie kind of revolves around, which is Hugh Jackman's magic trick, his prestige for Borden, to get Borden, to go to prison for his murder, right? So it sets up that and immediately goes to the court case. Michael Caine's up there. So he's talking about the trick that he can't explain to everyone because the trick would be worthless. So the judge says, okay, well, if you just tell me the secret, I'll be able to decide because this man's life is at stake. So, okay, we get it. The next shot or scene is Alfred Borden in prison, where the dude comes sent by Lord Caldwell wanting to buy his magic tricks. The present day plot, which is Borden is in the courtroom, gonna go to jail for murder, and then he's in prison and the guy wants to come and buy his tricks. This is the beginning of the whole present tense plot. Almost everything else in the entire movie it's not really a flashback. I guess it's more of a memory, but there's 2 journals, there's 2 diaries, Borden's diary and Angier's diary. So the movie cuts between all of these things, plus a couple other memories like Borden's life with Sarah, etc. Everything in the movie is chronological. It's just, if there's the different storylines, they're just intercut like that, so we're seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But nothing is out of order in its own timeline. So we follow everything through.
That's one thing that I love about Christopher Nolan, is that all of his movies mess with how to tell a story, especially with time. Obviously, Inception has time dilation in the dream world, but even traditional stories like Dunkirk, he's telling it 3 stories, different timelines. Batman Begins is full of flashback type scenes while he's training, while present day. And so Christopher Nolan has this great ability to take stories that could easily be told in chronological order and still be good movies, but he just makes them more, you almost have to do more work as a viewer, I guess, to pay attention, and it just makes the stories seem more interesting because of the way that they are told.
Yeah. I mean, the whole Dark Knight's told backwards.
What?
Nolan is so wonderful at this. And I know that The Prestige is based off a book, which I have not read. But anyway. So, the present day plot is Borden's in the courtroom. We see him in prison. The guy comes and gives him Angier's diary as a token of good faith, right? Because Hugh Jackman created this whole thing. The whole thing that you're seeing right now is already a magic trick. Okay. So, Borden opens up the diary, and he's reading Angier's diary, and that's when we flash back to Colorado, because that's what Borden's reading in the diary, is the Colorado. In the diary, talking about going to Colorado, is Angier reading Borden's diary that he's ciphering, like the cipher, the code. Borden's reading Angier's diary about Angier going to Colorado, reading Borden's diary about the beginning of their relationship. One of the first lines in Borden's journal is, "We were two young men who never intended to hurt anybody." The whole movie is about them hurting each other. Even, killing each other's loved ones, whether it's on purpose or not.
I think that line is about him and his brother, not him and Hugh Jackman.
Maybe. I've never thought of that in my life. Because it just, when that voiceover is there, it's Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale and Michael Caine doing the water trick with Julie.
Right. Well, I'm sure we'll get into it later, but all the clues about it being a double, I think that's just the very first one.
That blows my mind. I've never, ever, ever thought of that. So it's them doing the trick where he ties the knot, slips the knot, and he looks at Michael Caine. Michael Caine makes a face. And then grabs the axe while Julia's in the water tank, right? So we have the knot that he is supposed to do the different one of. The dialogue afterwards is them arguing about that. You can't tie that knot. She's like, I can slip a Langford underwater. Well, they're arguing, Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale. They're talking about any trick can be duplicated. I love when he says that line, any trick can be duplicated, and Christian Bale, wrong. Because, no, it can't. You gotta have a twin to do some of these tricks, right? So that's just I love the way he says it, too, because he's just like, he's agitated, arguing with them, and then just like, that one thing that gets to him, it's like, no, not every trick can be duplicated. So in the end of that scene, he says he wants them to go and find out how this other guy does this magic trick with the goldfish bowl. So they go, watch his show, and when he does the trick, Hugh Jackman is like he's impressed, and Christian Bale is just nodding knowingly. He already knows how the guy does it. So they see the trick, and then they're outside watching the man walk slowly and fragilely to get into his ride, or whatever. Christian Bale says, "This is the trick. This is the performance. Total devotion to his art." This is Christian Bale admiring the guy because he's like, I'm doing the same thing. My whole life is going to be a devotion to my art, which is this one trick that nobody else can do. So he's kind of talking about himself while he's talking about this old guy. Part of me is like, what if there's a different way he does that trick? We don't know. Nobody else knows. Maybe it's like a mechanism where the bowl comes up out of a trapdoor or something. Who knows? But the point is that Borden wouldn't see that. He's projecting his own life onto this guy and saying that it makes sense to him. He lives his entire life hiding the secret of his performance. So it's just a very telling moment.
Which, I don't know if you're going to talk about this later. That's what Hugh Jackman does too. Like Lord Caldwell. I don't know when he becomes Lord Caldwell, if he is the entire time, but he is the character that's,
He doesn't want to embarrass his family with his theatric endeavors. Because he's trying to do the goldfish bowl trick with Julia, and he's like, Borden saw it once, but I couldn't fathom it. Living your whole life pretending to be someone else. And she's like, well, you are pretending to be someone else. He's like, well, changing a name doesn't count. And then it goes back to Borden in prison reading Angier's diary, talking about Borden saying, but what does he know about self-sacrifice? And Borden closes the diary and he just goes, you fool. Because Angier has no idea. Borden's whole life has been sacrifice after sacrifice just for this trick. This movie is unbelievably sad for a lot of reasons, and I'll get to more of them. And the next scene is his memory of first meeting Sarah. So this scene is also very telling. Obviously everybody knows, with the bird, thing goes down, the little kid starts crying. He's like, oh, he killed it. He brings the bird back, and the kid goes, but where's his brother? Very smart lad, your son. And immediately after that, when he goes back to his workshop and he puts the bird back, he says, "You're the lucky one today." Dumps the dead bird in the garbage. So then, he's probably going on a date with Sarah, but he does the coin trick to the kid. He says, "Never tell anyone. They'll beg you and they'll flatter you, but once you give it up, you'll be nothing to them. The secret impresses no one. The trick you use it for is everything." And, again, so much of this is just, kind of the point of the whole movie.
You know what's interesting?
What?
So the line about, where's his brother? Obviously, Christian Bale has a brother, right? So that's the trick, that's the clue. But also, Hugh Jackman kills the double.
Every
so
time
the
trick
dies.
is done, one has to die.
Yeah.
So, the shot of all the bird cages lined up could also mirror one of the end shots of all the water tanks lined up in the burning warehouse.
That's cool.
So immediately after the trick with the kid, talking to the kid, is he's following Sarah up to the apartment, and he's like, "I could really use a cup of tea." She's like, "Oh, I would scandalize the landlord." And he's like, "You think that's enough to keep me out?" And she's like, "Yeah, I do." So, he leaves, she closes the door, she turns around, and he's in the apartment with the tea kettle. So immediately after he says, "The secret impresses no one, the trick you use it for is everything," he's not even just using this trick for his magic trick. He's using it in real life with this woman that he likes. But it's still sad that he goes on this date with her, and then the prestige, the man in the prestige, is the other one.
She's dating two people, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And I always feel like one of the brothers clearly doesn't like her. And is kind of abusive. And I always wondered if the two brothers ever talked, where it's like, dude,
All the time.
you know how to be mean to her, okay? I came home, she was crying, and said that I called her names this morning. What are you doing?
How could you say that to me? I don't remember saying that.
And so I just thought that was interesting, because it's not like he has to spend 3 weeks with her. Maybe it's like a couple hours here and there.
Yeah.
Like, don't be mean.
Well, there's a scene way later where he's talking to her, where he goes up to Fallon and he's like, "Sarah knows. Well, she knows something's wrong. Just be nice to her. Try to reassure her that I do love her." Just to recap a little bit, he's in prison reading the journal. What does Borden know about self-sacrifice? The memory of him meeting Sarah, doing that trick, and then he's in the apartment with the tea kettle and he's ha 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 laughing, and it cuts back to his face in prison as he's still holding that diary. And just thinking about self-sacrifice is what brought on this whole memory of Sarah. She's such a tragic character. She's put through so much, and her life, well, she kills herself. She can't handle everything that these twins put her through. The next scene is where they do the trick, and he looks back at Cutter before he slips that knot. We see Julie's face when she's turning to do the trick. She's looking at the knot and she's like, "Oh God," she knows something is wrong. You can see it on her face, and it's wonderful. So she goes in, she dies. Oh man, the parts where... What?
Just the funny, she goes in, she dies. Oh, yeah.
Oh, well...
I just blew past this.
No, I'm gonna...
Yeah.
But I'm gonna keep in there.
Much like the movie, Patrick will be jumping back and forth in timelines.
When she is drowning, he's hitting the thing with the axe, and it's intercut shots. The axe hitting, and her face and it's kind of horrifying. Just the look on her face as she's dying while he's hitting. When he breaks it and the water rushes out and her body thuds on the stage, it's ugh, you could hear her body hit the stage when it just pulls out with the water and slams down. It's a very strong, emotional. Hugh Jackman's right there, If only they knew some sort of CPR, because he's just slapping her face. The look of horror on Borden's face when he's like, "She couldn't slip the knot. I literally killed this woman." You can just see his face fall. It's a very, very strong scene.
Why do you think Borden did it? Just to have a moment with her, because they were kind of friends, right? They were doing the show. Do you think maybe it was hey, this is the show of trust? I know that he's treating you like you can't do this, but you can. But you said that she looks surprised, and so it's because then later there's that great moment, which I'm sure we'll talk about at the funeral, where it's "What not?" Right?
It's the next scene.
Oh, okay, cool. But what do you think his reasoning was? Because they never explain it. Did he just...
Well, earlier on, in the first one, he says, "The Langford double will hold tighter." So he's more concerned, if she can slip that knot, it's a better knot to hoist her up.
Right, but why so strong of a conviction? Because the audience isn't There's not gonna be anyone.
I don't know. Maybe it's the one twin versus the other twin. Maybe one of them is just like, I think this is a better version of the trick, and Cutter doesn't know what he's talking about, and he's just like trying to play everything safe, but this is a better knot, and I just, it's a small thing.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like, it's not a new trick that they don't want to do. It's just like, there's this one little aspect of this trick that we could just do it better. Why don't we just do it better? But the other one is like, I understand the safety things. He's like, well, she said she can slip it. If she can slip it and I can tie it, why don't we do it? It's not Cutter's trick. He's not in there. So it's probably just, a little bit of an ego thing. The next scene is the funeral. So when it cuts to that white room with them all in black standing in the center, first off, gorgeous shot. And Cutter's talking about a man who drowned at sea. It took him 5 minutes to cough. When they asked him what dying was like, he said, it's like going home. And he looks at Angier when he says that. This is all a comforting, reassuring thing. Obviously, that line will come back later. And then Borden comes in, and Cutter's like, what are you doing here, Borden? And that's when Angier says, what knot did you tie, Borden? So I don't know. You don't know? You don't know? As he just echoing in that room. God, that's such a good scene. The next scene is another memory with Sarah. It's the bullet catch one. He's in there, and she comes in, he's all excited to show her this trick, and then she's like, well, you're gonna be getting food for 3 of us. He's like, oh my god, you're pregnant. We should have told Fallon. Because the one she's talking to right now is not the dad. Fallon gets up and leaves, and she's like, oh, we can't afford to pay Fallon. He's like, we're not, he takes care of my interests. She's like, yeah, I'm pregnant. Oh, we should have told Fallon. It's the first thing he says. That poor woman. And then he's super excited about showing her this bullet catch trick. They brush past the pregnancy thing really quick because he wants to show her the bullet catch trick. After the bullet catch trick, he says, I love you. She's like, say it again. I love you. She says, not today. Some days you mean it. Some days you don't. Maybe today you're more in love with magic than you are with me. Again, because it's
2 people.
It's the other twin. He's really excited about magic, and he just should have told the actual father about the pregnancy. So the next scene is him doing the bullet catch where Angier comes in, blows 2 of his fingers off.
Which I love that moment right before it happens where Borden realizes that it's Hugh Jackman.
Waving the gun, he's like, who wants to volunteer? And everybody's like, me, and Fallon's standing there like, not you. And then he lets Hugh Jackman up. Of all the people who wanted to volunteer, how did he not recognize, obviously the disguise, but it's like,
right,
the other twin's the one that let him up. So the funeral, which knot did you tie, shows her the bullet catch. He gets his fingers blown off by Angier, asking him which knot did he tie. I really don't know. And then it goes to Angier sitting in Colorado reading the diary, where Borden's like, one half of me is convinced that I tied whatever knot, but I fought with myself endlessly over this, and I do not know which knot I tied. This is not verbatim dialogue. But then he's like, how can he not know? Which we quote that all the time.
Yeah. Because again, shouting, yelling lines seems to be what we like to...
And then it cuts back to Sarah with him with the fingers, where she's like, it's just as bad as the day that it happened. How can it be bleeding this much? So just, again, the film's narrative, when it's going into the diary, to the other diary and stuff, right now all these scenes are about the bullet catch, which is only done because of Julie's death, because of the knot. So it's all chronological, and it's all linear. We're just jumping between the different things that have to do with this plot that's being followed as we're watching it through the 2 different diaries. This to me feels like a shift in the movie, because this is the part where Cutter goes up to Angier and he's like, I want to get back to working. Scarlett Johansson comes in, they get the new invention for the bird cage so it doesn't hurt anybody, it doesn't kill any birds. They talk to the guy about getting the shows and everything, so it's almost like a new page, Angier never got his answer about which knot was tied, but he got his revenge on Borden. Cool. Moving forward with his new show with Scarlett Johansson. Everything looks great until Borden shows up on stage and messes up the cage. So now it's, the revenge they're getting on each other back and forth. And then it moves on to Hugh Jackman is still obsessed with Borden in a way, because for some reason he's following him. Oh, Borden's got his new trick coming up. That's why. So he's following him in the streets, and he sees Borden with Sarah. And he says that he loves her. She says, see, today it's true. And it makes it special on the days that it is true, which is kind of like a happy moment. Later, that line will come back with the exact opposite, where it's, today it's true. It makes it so much harder when it's not. So you can just see her progression. Anyway, I'm not there yet.
That's emotional abuse.
unintentional. So in Angier's diary, where he's saying, Borden has happiness and love. Happiness that should have been mine, that he took away from me. So in his journal he says, happiness that should have been mine. His journal shows he never had the happiness I envied. He craves one minute, rails against it the next. His mind is a divided one. His soul is restless. His wife and child tormented by his fickle and contradicting nature. When that voiceover quote is ending, it cuts back to Borden in prison because he's reading Angier's voice in Angier's diary. And you can just see the pain on his face. Reading about Angier talking about how tormented Sarah and Jess are because of his fickle and contradictory nature, which isn't true because it's two people, but like, man, the pain that Borden feels reading that in Angier's diary is so strong, and I love that moment. Immediately after that is when Borden in prison talks to the guy that comes up and he says, I've reconsidered, I'll give you my tricks, I just want to see my daughter. Right? He loves his daughter so much that he's like, I need to give her the best life, and I feel so terrible about everything that has happened. And Angier's diary made him feel that way, so he has reconsidered Lord Caldwell's offer. Or Caldlow, whatever, Caldlow. One of the next scenes, he's talking to David Bowie about this machine that he once built, and some really good lines are, man's reach exceeds his grasp. Not true. Man's grasp exceeds his nerve. Which is very telling, because this machine can do things that the person who would to be using it might not want to do. So science can do things that man might not want to do because he already knows, well, maybe he doesn't already know the consequences because he doesn't know the machine's going to go wrong and duplicate things. He's expecting his machine to transport it. One of the next scenes with Scarlett Johansson, Olivia, she's talking and she's like, Borden's got a new show, don't go to it or whatever. Cutter says that if Borden thinks you're even, you guys won't be attacking each other anymore. He's like, even? My wife for a couple of his fingers? So this is another shift in the movie because he's going to go see Borden's show anyway, even though she tells him that Cutter said to not to. So he goes to see the show and he comes back. We don't get to see the whole thing. We see it start and then it cuts to him sitting in the chair, taking his fake stuff off. And she's like, what happened? It was the greatest magic trick I've ever seen. And it's like the tone changes. It's not just this little rivalry now. Something big has occurred. Because Borden's been talking about this trick the whole movie. In the beginning, any trick can be duplicated. Wrong. And then when he's talking to Sarah, he's like, I can still, when he loses his fingers, I can still do some tricks. I can still do the one they're going to remember me for. And here it is. It's finally here. We've been leading up to it, and it blows Angier away. He can't figure it out. So he's talking to Cutter, and he's like, he uses a double. It's the only way. And they're arguing, he's like, it can't be. It's not a double. It's the same man that comes out of that other door. And Olivia says, it's the same man. He uses padded gloves to hide his damaged fingers, but you can tell it's the same man. And that is what drives Angier even a little more mad. He's like, even though we're going to get a double so I can steal his trick for now, I'm still going to find out how he actually does it so I can make mine better than his. So they go ahead and find the double. He's hilarious. I like it. They get him ready. They do the trick. The trick is phenomenal. Everybody's applauding, but he's down there under the stage and he takes his bow to the applause. He can't see the audience. They can't see him, but he's like trying to be in that moment because that's all he wants is to be loved for his trick. One of the next lines when he's talking to Olivia is she's like, this trick is great. Everybody loves us. And he's like, yeah, but no one cares about the man who goes into the box. They care about the man who comes out the other side. He's like, well, why can't Rook go down and then I come up out of the box? And Cutter's like, no, Rook can't sell that trick. As soon as he opens his mouth, the game is up. It sucks, but you gotta take your bows under the stage all the time. Even though his trick is great, everybody loves him, he still is not happy. A, because he has to take his bows under the stage, and B, because he still doesn't know how Borden's actually doing this trick. When Olivia is kissing him, he's like, I need you to go work for him. I'm sending you away to go figure out his secret because I don't care how famous we are right now, how well we're doing, how good my trick is. I'm obsessed with Borden and his trick, and that is literally all that matters. So when Olivia goes to talk to Borden, And she's like, I'm gonna work for you. I can dress your show up and give you what it doesn't have. I can make it better than his, etc. And he's like, that's the truth. Is it? Her face for a moment, and then it cuts away. Later we come back to that moment, so we get that little bit of that same moment repeated, and then she says that no, the truth is that I loved him, and he sent me away like he would send a maid to pick up his shirts. I hate him for that. So we don't get that line yet. When she goes to Borden, we still think that it's part of Angier's plan. So one of the next things that happens is Root, the double, realized he can make demands. Cutter's like, he's kind of blackmailing us. He's like, yeah, it usually takes him a lot longer to figure it out. But I love that line. But he's like, we don't do the show. We don't do any tricks we can't entirely control. He's like, no. Let's just do more of this trick, and then we'll phase it out. So Root goes up, or he comes down and he sees Root not going up, and then Root goes up and he goes, like he missed grabbing the top hat. And it's really funny. And we're like, oh no, this is bad. Okay, his trick's gonna fail. But the next time it fails is Borden is there. So he drops down, breaks his leg. There's no padding, and he looks, and there's Alfred Borden going up, walking out on stage. He's like, there's just too much magic at my show across the street. Oh yeah, and Root's all tied up, and he brings him out of the ceiling. Man.
What was Michael Caine doing during that? How did he let someone get backstage, tie up the double, move the pads?
So now that his leg has been broken, Borden has destroyed his show. He meets with Olivia again, and she's like, oh, you're late or whatever. He's like, well, it takes me a while to get around now that my leg has been broken. And so he's like, how does he do it? She's like, Cutter was right, he uses a double. Angier still won't believe it. She's like, I've seen it. Fake hair, wardrobe, glasses. He leaves it lying around backstage, but we don't use it in any of the shows. And Robert's like, it's all a distraction. He's leaving that stuff around for you to find so you get the wrong idea of it. But we know that's his costume for Fallon. That's his twin being a different person all the time, because they don't use it in any of the shows. Very telling. But one of the points of the whole movie, with the whole are you watching closely, and Cutter's, you don't really want to know. You want to be fooled. You know, the point is that the misdirection, the things that you're supposed to be looking at, you look at everything else instead. And Angier's doing the same thing. It's right in front of him. He uses a double. He's got hair, makeup, and glasses lying around backstage. They don't use it in any of the shows. But he doesn't see it. He just wants to find out how he does the trick. The misdirection isn't actually misdirection. He's just being misdirected because of his obsession. He leaves that stuff around for you to find. She says all the time. He doesn't know when I'm looking. All the time, Olivia. That's who he is. That's what it takes. He lives his act. Don't you see? And it's funny because he is nailing it. And he still doesn't see. That's the scene where she gives him the notebook. It says, like, I have to put it back in the morning or he'll know. And he's like, okay, well, I'll go in and stage a break-in. And he's like, I have his notebook. It would take forever to decode this, but I have it. It's mine. I can steal all his secrets now. This is it. This is the key. And that's this scene, this moment is so very important, especially the thing that I said where he says, that's the truth, is it? But we haven't seen her tell the actual truth yet about her hating him. She gives him Borden's diary. So he has the diary, but he can't decode it without the cipher. So he has Cutter help him kidnap Fallon so that he can bury him to be like, give me the keyword and I'll give you your friend back, which is a very, very powerful scene. What we don't know is that Borden wants Angier to have the notebook, and he wants to give him the keyword to the notebook. He just doesn't expect him to kidnap and almost kill Fallon. He gives him the keyword. The keyword is the method. It just says Tesla. So he's like, looks like we're going to America. And Cutter says, obsession is a young man's game. I can't follow you any further. So Angier goes off to America to go find Tesla. So that's the part in the journals, the diaries, where we saw in the beginning where he arrives in Colorado. The next scene with Borden and Fallon, where Borden is drunk and he's there with Olivia and Sarah going out to eat in the restaurant. And that scene is very strongly emotional because Sarah is not having it. She's like, Olivia calls him Freddie. He's like, that's my name. And so she has Fallon take Olivia away, which is funny because the one that's dressed up as Fallon is the one who's in love with Sarah. The one who's sitting there is the one who's in love with Olivia. So he's having to be drunk, and he's like, I almost lost something very important to me. Okay, I've got a new trick. I'm gonna bury myself every night, and someone's gonna come along and dig me up. because this horrible thing almost happened to him. And he doesn't want to have to sit there and entertain his twin's wife. And so she's developing a drinking problem. This is the scene where she's like, no more secrets or whatever. He's like, secrets are my life. He's like, I just came from the bloody theater. Of course I'm dressed up like this. People love it. This is who I am. Because he doesn't want his twin's wife telling him to not be himself after his show. When he almost died that day. It's just a very potent scene with a lot going on. Very strong emotions going on. So the next thing coming up, like I said, is where he's like, that's the truth, is it? And she looks, then it cuts. So here we get that, where she's like, no. The truth is, I loved him, and he sent me away like he would send a maid to pick up his shirts. I hate him for that. Your show can be so much better than what it is, and I can show you how. And so, Angier in Colorado reading Borden's diary, Borden's words are like, but how can I trust her? I thought of a way that I can trust her. Oh, he's falling in love with her. He's like, the dangers of such an affair, because one twin loves her and the other one's still married to Sarah, right? She must help me to rid ourselves of Angier. And today she has proved her loyalty to me. Today my mistress proves her usefulness. Not to me, you understand. I've been convinced since she led me to root the double from Angier's show. Today, Olivia proves her love for me to you, Angier. Yes, Angier. She gave you this notebook at my request. And yes, Tesla is merely the keyword, not the method. Did you really think I would part with my secret so easily? Goodbye, Angier. May you find solace for your thwarted ambition back in your American home. A little bit earlier, Angier saw Thomas Edison's men in the hotel. So after this, he gets all mad and he goes up to Tesla and he's like, you never made this machine for somebody else. And Andy Serkis is like, well, I never said that we did. And Angier is furious because he's been sent on this wild goose chase by Borden. So Borden, once again, is winning. So the whole thing with Olivia coming, getting the notebook, and him going to kidnapping Fallon to get the keyword, well, except for the kidnapping Fallon part, was all set up by Borden. And now Angier has been in America with Tesla, spending a fortune, wasting his time trying to get this machine that apparently was never made for Borden, and it's all been set up by Borden. This whole diary, the encryption and everything, has been set up by Borden to trick Angier. So when Angier's in there yelling at Tesla and whatever, they're going to test the machine again on the cat. So they test it on the cat, and Angier leaves, and then here's the cats fighting, which is like, did he let that cat out? How'd that cat get outside? But anyway, so then they discover all the top hats, and he's like, exact science is never an exact science. We just need to figure out why the machine's calibrated this way. Give us a little more time, and the machine's going to be ready. Then there's the scene with Borden and Sarah, I already mentioned this, where she's like, today you do mean it when you say you love me. Just makes it so much harder when you don't, because she's drinking. She's drinking all the time now. And immediately after that is when Borden is supposed to take his little girl Jess to the zoo. So he goes to Fallon and he's like, Sarah knows something's up. Please be nice to her. Convince her that I love her. Please do this for me. Why didn't the twins just switch spots for the day? So they could each be with the one they love. Because he's sad that Sarah's doing this. He goes to Fallon, please treat her nice. And then he goes immediately to Olivia. And Olivia's like, what's wrong? We talked about this. When you're with me, you're with me. Leave your family at home where they belong.
Well, maybe they have some sort of arrangement. It's like a hard line. Like, I get to be me, on Tuesdays. It's like, this is my Tuesday. Kind of like divorced parents with their kids. Because if you start to pick and choose like that, then one of them, if they've got a lot of good things going on with their life, like, well, I want to spend the weekend with my kid. It's like, oh, so now I'm just stuck as this guy and I can't do anything. So they probably had a very strict...
Depending on what events they had going on, it's like if they had to do multiple things in a day and then a show, it's like they can go and switch right before the show, etc. But I mean, if it were me and I was, trying to spend time and be with my wife, I would be like, you can be the one that comes out of the box at the other end. Or you can do whatever you want in the show tonight. Like, let me have the morning and the afternoon. So the next thing that happens is Tesla's thing is all burned. Angier gets his machine. Tesla leaves a letter that's like, my instructions for the machine are complete, except for this one thing. Destroy it. Drop it to the deepest bottom of the ocean. Such a thing will bring you only misery. Of course, Angier doesn't heed it. Brings the machine back. He tests it in case Tesla didn't iron out all the kinks, which he said, and puts the gun there. Tests the machine. We don't get to see the end of that. There's a lot of this where it'll set up a scene, it'll cut to something else, and then later we'll get the end of that thing that we already saw, and then what actually happened, which is there's a clone, and he shoots him. Because it's still Borden in prison reading Angier's diary about all this, where he tests the machine. And then when he goes in the machine, it's all the electricity, and then it cuts to white, and there's still a voiceover, and it cuts to Borden in his prison cell. And he's like, and this is where I leave you, at the turn. Yes, you, Borden, sitting in your cell, awaiting your death for my murder. So now the second diary has been revealed that it's all been set up to one-up the other guy again. I vaguely remember something. Didn't your dad, call it? But as soon as the first diary was revealed, the next time we see the other one reading the diary, he's like, well, that one's probably a fake, too. I don't know. Somebody called it, and I was mad.
It's probably me.
The next scene, one of the next scenes, is where Sarah and Borden are having that fight, where they're yelling at each other, very strongly emotional, and Sarah's just distraught. She's at her wit's end, and she's like, I know what you really are. And he's like, you can't talk like that, Sarah. Shut up. And we see out in the hallway the little girl sitting there, sad in the hallway, listening to him. And then Fallon comes in lovingly and takes her and carries her away from that fight. And again, it's like, I don't know the reason why the twins weren't switching spots.
Maybe they didn't like each other either.
The twins?
Yeah.
I've never thought of that.
Me either.
They probably had, a lot of issues here and there. Well, they do yell at each other later. But yeah, where she's like, do you love me? He says, not today. No. And part of me is like, when she says, I know what you really are, did she figure out that they are twins? And when she's like, do you love me? He says, no, not today. That's him telling her, I am not the twin that actually loves you. Like, I'm the other one. So I don't know if she actually figured it out and knows that she's married to two guys, technically. But I feel like she has figured it out. She knows. And she decides that she cannot continue to live her life that way. And that's why immediately, the next scene, I believe, is when she goes into his workshop and hangs herself. So now Angier comes back from America with his machine. He goes and puts the card under the glass for Cutter, like Cutter did to him. Sets up this whole engagement, gets the guy to come see it, and they set up the whole thing. And one of the things when he's talking about his show that he wants to put on, the only thing that he really cares about is he wants to make the show specific and big and grand enough that Borden cannot ignore it. Then there's the scene of the twins where he's like, oh, he's back, he's got a show. Or Olivia's talking to him. He's like, okay, well, I'm going to go see a show. Borden's sitting talking to Olivia, and she's like, you haven't talked about your wife at all. And he's like, well, the truth is, I never really loved Sarah. And Olivia's like, yeah, okay, whatever, you're lying. He's like, no, part of me did, but the part that's sitting here with you, the part that's sitting here right now, I love you, Olivia. So Borden goes to see the trick, the real transported man, and we see it, and we see the electricity, and then we see Borden's face, the trapdoor shuts. So we see, Borden knows about the trapdoor, right? And then Angier's way up there back on the balcony, and he's like, man's grasp exceeds his imagination. So that line from before come full, and now he gets his audience reaction. Angier made it to the Prestige, gets the audience's reaction to his big, incredible trick, and it's the moment he's wanted his whole life, his whole career. This is it, and he got it. Okay, cool. Well, one of them did, because now he's just cloning himself and killing him. And is it the real one that gets to be alive every time, or the clone? I guess we'll never know. But, each clone only gets to live, 24 hours? Yeah. The next trick.
Well, that goes back to his idea about when Borden says, what does he know about sacrifice? And Hugh Jackman has that line near the end that's like, I didn't know who was going to come out of that box. So he literally, every time he did the trick, didn't know if he was going to die. Like, the person that teleports obviously has all the memories up to that moment, so it's not like he feels the death every time.
Yeah.
But the one dude dies.
Yeah.
And that is the ultimate sacrifice, is yourself, over and over and over.
So Borden and Fallon, after he's seen the show, and they can't figure it out, and he's like, why can't you outthink him? How did he do it? And he's like, you know what? I don't care. Okay, we're done. We're not going to go to a show. We're just going to leave him alone. Then he goes to the show again. And this is the part that the movie started at, because this is the part where he goes backstage down there to see how the trick is done, because he's got to know. And then the clone in the tank, and Borden's like, somebody help him, he's drowning. So he's getting the axe and trying to get him out. Borden's actually trying to save Angier's life, and then he gets put in prison for his murder and killed. Very cruel.
Yeah, don't help other people.
Basically, yeah. Yes, Angier set up this whole show because he wanted to put on the best show ever and to be the man in the prestige at the end and not the man in the box, which he gets. But he also set up this show to make it big enough and important enough that Borden can't ignore it because he wants to frame Borden for his murder. Because the night that Borden goes backstage and down there and sees the clone, there is no prestige. Angier doesn't appear. So he had it planned out. But how did he know? Was he watching? Did he know that Borden went backstage and then he was like, oh, okay, tonight's the night I don't appear? I don't know. But he had it all planned out. Probably all of his rage from being in America with Borden's diary talking to him is just like, I need to do this as well, which is the point for the diary in the prison cell. Because it's all been planned out. So Cutter doesn't want this machine to get sold. He talks to the guy who's getting all the stuff for Lord Caldwell, and he's like, okay, well, I want to deliver the machine so I can cross paths with him and talk to him, which he does. So he goes to deliver the machine, sees Angier, Lord Caldwell, whatever, and is horrified. And he's like, that little girl, I've seen her before with Borden. Angier, what have you done? He's like, I tried not to involve you, John. But Cutter realizes that Angier has done this whole thing and framed Borden, and it doesn't sit right with him. So, at the end, when Cutter's like, where do you want me to deliver the machine with the prestige materials? So he goes with Hugh Jackman to deliver the machine and everything, and then when Cutter is leaving, Angier's still in there, Borden walks in, and Cutter nods to him. So, it's planned. Cutter's, gonna betray Angier after this lifetime of working together. Angier has done something unforgivable, and so Cutter betrays him in favor of Borden, or Fallon, technically. Before that, Angier, Lord Caldwell, goes to the prison with Jess to see Borden, where Borden's like, oh my god, you're still alive. And he hands him over the secrets. He's like, here's all the tricks, here's all the secrets that you wanted, just my daughter, my life is at stake. And Angier rips him up and throws the secrets. He's like, I don't care. You have to admit, no matter what your trick was, mine is better, because nobody cares about the man in the box. They only care about the man that comes out the other side. So that line, which has been a defining thing for both men the whole time, Angier thinks he's one-upping him because the man in the box, the one that nobody cares about, is Borden, the one that he is framed, put in jail, and is going to be killed. But again, Angier doesn't know there's a twin that's going to come and kill him.
Yeah, in the prison there's a cool little bit of foreshadowing where Fallon visits Borden.
Yeah.
And he throws him the ball, and he catches it. And that's how they did the trick, was throwing the ball to each other.
Yeah, that's almost immediately after when Angier goes to see him, because he's like, with my daughter at the workhouse, whatever, he's like, I'm sorry about Sarah. I'm sorry for a lot of things. You go live for both of us now. You go live your life in full. Gives him the ball. And that's where we see a shot of Fallon's face long enough. We've never seen his whole face looking right on at us for more than a split second. It's always the side of his face. It's always him moving around. We've only heard him say 2 lines ever. And they're kind of mumbled, right? And so this one, we see him full on in the face as he's looking, and he says, goodbye. And it's that's when he's holding the ball right after he caught it. So in the end, Cutter's talking to Angier, and he's like, I once told you that the man who was drowning said it was like going home. I lied. He said it was agony. And then there's a sound that comes in because it hits Hugh Jackman, where he's like, this whole time when his clones have been drowning, he's like, they're going home. Drowning isn't that bad. To have his clones die, because that's how Julia died, because he thought that was the peaceful death. But it's not. And that turn is very, very, very strong. After Cutter says that, he said it was agony. Cutter leaves, so Angier's down there looking at one of the boxes. He's looking into the glass, but we don't see the clone in there. But he says to himself, nobody cares about the man in the box, because he now is struggling with this thing that all the clones he's killed, it's been agony for them / himself. And then he hears something in Cutter, and so he's like, bang! The gunshot hits him. I remember when I saw this in theaters, I jumped. I was not expecting a loud gunshot to go off in that quiet dark. He's holding up the lantern. So then there's the reveal. He's like, a brother, a twin. Who was the man in the box? Well, we took turns. Sometimes it was me, sometimes it was him. None of it was easy. I don't remember what Angier says, but he's like, it was simple, yeah, but no, not easy. Nothing is easy about two men sharing one life. And then you see him with the cut off fingers, and the other one puts his hand over it to cut the fingers off. It's like, oh yeah. He had to cut his fingers off so they could match. And then, yeah, with Angier saying it took courage to get into that box every night, not knowing if I'd be the man drowning or the man in the Prestige. He's like, did you see where you are? Look. Look. It's like, I don't care. Bourne says, I don't care. You went around the world. You spent a fortune. You've done terrible things. And all for nothing. But Angier's final moment is, it wasn't for nothing. You never understood. It was, if you could fool them for a second, if you could make them wonder. You know, it was the look on their faces, pulling off of the magic trick and getting to be in the Prestige and see the audience. That's what his goal in life was. And he got that many times. He just doesn't get to continue living now. So, alright. And then the Michael Caine's voiceover, like I said from the beginning, with him talking about the pledge, the turn, and the Prestige. He's talking to Jess. That's the very end. Now that Angier's dead, Borden comes back to get his girl. Everybody's happy, except for the dead people.
One thing I always thought about the movie is at the end, with that voiceover, it's like, you're not really looking, you want to be fooled, and the camera pans over and you see a shot of the Hugh Jackman clone floating in the water, and then it's like all of them. It's set up to make it seem like a reveal, but you already know. And so I never understood like that final, literal final moment of the movie. It almost felt as if there's like a mystery movie, and then they solve the mystery, and at the end, and they're like, and then the mystery will live on, and pans to the conclusion that we've already seen. So the very final shot of the movie, I never understood. Like, was Christopher Nolan maybe attempting a similar thing with Inception, where you're supposed to then wonder, like, is the science real, or is there something else going on in this movie that we're not aware of?
That's interesting. I've never thought of that. Definitely in my top 10. Probably top 5. But definitely top 10 of all time.
So if you watch it again, or if you also love it, let us know in the comments. Please like, comment, subscribe, ring the notification bell, because a new movie every week. And next week we'll be talking about Baz Luhrmann's Moulin Rouge. I'm Levi.
I'm Patrick.
And this has been Levi and Patrick Went to the Movies, Christopher Nolan's The Prestige. Hold on, I have to yawn.